This is TWiT.
Has Intel had much of an AI presence in, when I think about the major players in AI, I don't feel like I hear as much about Intel as I do the NVIDIA.
Well, a lot of times if you have an Intel processor, you have an NVIDIA card, and that is the focus.
It's better than having an NPU and an ARM chip, if you ask me. Yeah. Right. Intel, though, has absolutely, you can buy a PC right now with a Copilot. It's not a Copilot Plus PC, but it's got a Copilot button on it. In fact, I had one. It's an Intel Windows machine. So Intel has all of that capability built into it. But the number of problems were exacerbated by the fact that they have now a series of chips that are crashing and causing real problems. In fact, Patrick, didn't you say you have one of those i9s in your? Was it you, Patrick? Somebody in our.
I have one.
Benito.
Yep.
So the 13 and 14 gen core processors have instability issues, and they've been crashing.
Well, it feels like Intel and Boeing are in the same space.
They're very much in this
large companies that have had a leadership for a long time. Yeah. Fortunately, Intel's only crashing computers, but I think that Boeing and Intel have the same problem of a lot of corporate bloat and a drive to continue to get profits, and basically not even moving fast, moving slow and breaking things, and not being able to really stay focused on producing great products, which at scale is very, very difficult with all the politics and all the layers and all the different folks with different priorities. As a company gets larger, Apple so far has done a relatively good job at managing that. But for a lot of companies, as you become that large corporate entity, it's very hard to continue to stay tight and produce a great product.
This is from Tom's Hardware. Intel is going to issue a microcode update in a week or two to address the crashing issues which cause PCs to crash or blue screen inexplicably during gaming and other workloads due to what Intel attributes to excessive voltage. But this is the big problem. And Benito, has this happened to you? The issue can cause permanent damage. The microcode update that they're putting out will not fix processors that are already suffering from crashing.
I've had crashes, but just application
not
level
while
crashes,
gaming,
not like full on crashes.
So
mine's okay.
Then you'll have the microcode update, and with any luck, that will fix it, and you won't have to worry. Okay. Intel has extended the warranty on all boxed in. This is important, because most people don't buy boxed Intel processors. But if you did, the warranty is now up to 5 years on the boxed Intel Core 13 or 14th gen processors. Most people buy it in a PC or as part of a kit. I think the motherboard manufacturer, the PC manufacturer will have to back you up on that one. It impacts all 65 watt and higher models. Anyway, that was devastating enough. Now, and then Intel announces they're going to lay off 15% of their workforce.
Yeah.
15,000 people.
Because 100,000 people worked at Intel. The math was easy.
Well done.
It's going to get a lot more complicated now.
It is.
I
had a moment. It was like 15%, 15,000. I'm like, oh, well, that was easy.
I knew immediately.
Thank you to all journalists who didn't do well in math. Thank you for having us divide out of 100. That's really great. The shame of it is that I think in a lot of ways, Intel's management now gets it. But they are
Pat Gelsinger.
Yeah.
He rejiggered the company a couple of years ago, hoping to make it through this tough spot.
But they knew this was happening, and they're paying the price for years of mismanagement and also difficult circumstances. It's a real textbook innovator's dilemma, isn't it? Which is they're like, no. We know that we could make money and use other people's designs on our fabs, but no, it's not Intel. We're going to design our own chips and fab them ourselves, and that's our whole business model. And if they had changed sooner, they did have incredible skill at fabbing and could have turned themselves into these, fabs for other designers, and they just said no. And I get why they said no. That's why the innovator's dilemma is a dilemma. If it was easy, they would have just thrown caution to the wind.
And it happens to so many companies.
But they're a leader who falls by the wayside now because they couldn't change, because they weren't motivated to change until it was too late.
Well, and I think that sometimes for big companies, it's a mixture of not wanting to give up the revenue from A to get to B. And, and that restructure is super scary. In addition to the fact that of just not sure whether B is really going to produce more than A, down the road. Like, this is pretty good right now.
I worked for a magazine publisher. You don't have to tell me. I mean, they're literally like, PC World prints money. Why would we ever do a website about computers? And they allowed CNET to exist at the start, and like that was the jig was up, and I get it. They're like, but we make so much money from magazine advertising. Why would we ever change? I'm like, well, because of the future. And they're like, I don't get paid in the future. I get paid today, and here we are.
I've told the story on MacBreak, I think, but I did a talk for publishers. I got brought in to speak at something or whatever, and it was 200 publishers in 2002, and I just said, you all have to get on the internet and take your subscribers and move them there right now. Like right now.
5 years ago,
and they literally laughed at me while I was talking. Like it was just one of those things. The only ones that didn't laugh, they can't talk to me afterwards, was the New York Times.
It's not like Intel didn't see this coming. You can see it coming and still not be able to avoid it. That's the innovative dilemma.
That bill was going to come due.
Yeah. It's not like you can say, oh boy, look at Kodak. Oh boy! Here comes digital.
But Kodak created the first digital cameras.
They sure did.
And then they buried it because they were afraid it would hit their film business. This gets into that common problem is, well, if we innovate in that direction, that could eat up something else, cannibalize something else. And I think that's one of the things that Apple does fairly well. Is they're actually often willing to cannibalize their own businesses. Right. They're willing to, just ditch them, to go to the next thing. Almost, at probably a speed almost faster than almost everybody else.
It's like classic. Steve Jobs had the best-selling music player, which was the iPod Mini, and they canceled it and replaced it with the iPod Nano because they knew that a flash-based player was going to win. Right. And so why not replace themselves? And that's it's a tough mindset to be in, though. Yeah, it's just really tough. And like I said, it's not the innovator's obvious answer. It is a dilemma because you do want to make your shareholders happy, and there's such a predisposition toward focusing on the present instead of the future. And Pat Gelsinger knew the bill was going to come due and is just trying to get them to where they need to be, but he's paying off the bills of people in the last 10 years of Intel.
And I hope you didn't have Intel stock, because look at this loss. On Friday, they lost 26% of their value, down to $21 from $35 just a couple of days ago. That's bad. And it makes it hard to dig out of the hole. The story with Kodak was maybe more nuanced than that. I've heard economists say that the real problem was digital didn't have the profit margins that film and developing did. So even had they transitioned to film, to digital, they wouldn't have been able to maintain a business built on that kind of a profit margin.
But they were also way ahead. Like the thing is,
too early. Maybe.
No, I think that they could have had higher resolution cameras. They could have had higher performance. They could have been making products. They could have been selling memory cards. They could have been, again, the hard part for Kodak was you get into, you start getting people into digital. This is their issue was, you buy the memory card once. You don't buy film over and over and over again. That was their big, they were like, we can't have people able to just make images without buying film. That's, it was a huge problem for them.
That's part of the delusion that you get in a corporate culture, though, where you believe that if you say no, the world stops. Yeah. And of course it doesn't. It's inevitable. Right. Change is inevitable. So you have to embrace it.
This was the record industry's mantra. When piracy started to happen, everything. Their mantra was, I know we're dead. I just don't want it to be on my shift. And I just want to get through to retirement, and then I don't care what happens. And I think that's somewhat the attitude on these incumbents.
And when I was in the music industry, we were in the early 90s was the heyday. Like we never made more money than, the parties, even for alternative rock.
It's almost always that way, isn't it? Right?
Oh, it was so
You're
great.
At your peak.
But we were sitting there talking about, when we had meetings at Sony, we would be talking about the fact that we cannot keep on charging $17 a CD because the cassettes were 23 cents per unit for the cassettes and 44 cents per CD. So there was a 19 cent difference between the two of what it cost to actually produce them. But they were charging $6.99 for the cassettes and $17 for the CDs. And they were saying, well, it's because of the IP. We were like, the IP is the same. I mean, we were working there telling them, IP is the same. Why are you charging $11? But the answer was
making one good song per record.
I know, but the issue is that the cassette that they were selling for $6.99, they were selling the exact same IP for $18 at Tower Records. And the reason that they would always say is because we can. We can people will pay that. And we said, but the problem is that people won't pay that forever, and they're going to be always looking for another alternative. Yeah. And back then we didn't even know that, this was going to happen, but we were like, eventually they're going to find another way to do this. And so then there was this band called Ned's Atomic Dustbin, and they had Godfather out, and it wasn't selling very well. And I remember we said, let's just do this for $7.99. Just do a special for $7.99. And they did it for $7.99 and sold like 50,000 units in like a week. Like it was just like this incredible surge. And we were like, see? And then they just went right back to
well, and the truth is, because you're taking me back to my high school years here, the truth
right.
is what would happen is one of your friends, or college too,
exactly.
one of your friends would get the CD and you'd tape copies for everybody else.
Napster was
before there was Napster.
Yeah.
That was what you did.
Steve Jobs comes along and says, the record industry didn't want to do it, but I'm going to sell singles for 99 cents.
Right.
And that was also a problem.
And he only was able to do that because Napster had happened. So he had leverage and he knew it.
Hindsight is 20/20. I mean, it's great. You can see the whole process with Kodak, with the music industry. Is that what's happening with Intel right now?
A little bit. I mean, it's slightly different, but the idea is that Intel had its things that it was good at, and it was, PCs and maybe servers and all of that. And this ARM stuff, it was for phones. It was for low.
Sneak up on them,
it was
though.
For low power. But this is the thing, though. It doesn't
They
sneak.
tried to do scale. Remember,
it doesn't sneak up on you, but it is hard to prioritize the thing that doesn't make you money if you're an executive. This is the problem with, I would say, a lot of industry is very few executives are provided incentives for the long term.
Right.
Very few. Right. They would change if you said, I'm going to pay you based on what the stock is in 5 years, not this year. In 5 years, you stock options, or what our profit is in 5 years or 7 years. And if we're dead in 7 years, you get nothing, no money. You owe us money. Everybody's attitude would be very different. But instead, it's sort of like, well, I just got to make my number this quarter.
Yeah.
I got to make my number this quarter. And if you think like that, you were going to make bad decisions, bad long-term decisions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies just run that way. Even if everybody knows, and I'll tell you, this is when we do pundit stuff on MacBreak Weekly, and there's always that moment where you're like, I can't believe Apple isn't doing this thing. And it's like, you can guarantee yourself that there are people inside all of these companies who know it. But the people at the highest levels have so much motivation to make their number, get their money, retire to their boat, and be gone, that this is why big companies make stupid decisions. This is why.
Well, and you just look at, I've worked as a consultant for many of these companies, and the thing is this just a series of meetings, and it slowly whittles away into nothing. Like, this person doesn't like this and that person doesn't like this. And you come up with an innovative idea. And by the time it comes out the other end, it's kind of been whittled down to this little thing that doesn't make any sense anymore. And it's just so easy, when you have that, when you don't have key people making decisions that have, near dictator status over their little area, that can just make decisions and move forward. And that's one of the things Apple has had in the past. I think that they're still it's more challenging now than it used to have. They used to have a person that was making all the decisions, for all the major products. And I think that's always their challenge. But when you get into these committee, it's just death by committee, and everybody just keeps on,
what's going to keep Apple from falling into that hole?
I think that so far, they still are, I think, fairly vertical. I think there's not that many people making decisions. There's probably 10 people in there that are making most of the major decisions about products. Whether we agree with them or not is another thing. But I think that they're, and I think Apple is...
That's no protection.
No.
Pat Gelsinger may be the only person at Intel made decisions. I think that's not a protection at all, unless you think they're geniuses.
So the way that so when Steve Jobs came back, famously, Apple was about to go out of business. One of the things that he tried to do before he died was build something called Apple University. And the whole idea there was, what if we take people from business schools and build a curriculum that literally we are creating a curriculum of the corporate culture that Steve Jobs, have bestowed on Apple, because if we lose sight of this approach, we will fail. So it's very close to being the Ozymandias statue in the desert, right? Like it may not work, but he at least
was on my works.
And despair. But he was thinking, like, how do we keep this going? I need to build a machine to keep the culture going.
Every executive suite has that.
I know, right?
Question. Hey, thank you for watching this little snippet from our big show, the News Roundtable, This Week in Tech. I'm Leo Laporte. Each week we cover the week's tech news, in-depth analysis, but it's also fun and engaging. You'll find it at twit.tv along with all of our shows. And if you want more, just hit the subscribe button, and we'll be sure to bring you a lot more great content. Thanks for listening.